Good morning, 10th Sunday of Ordinary Time, and we read the Gospel of Mark. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, "He's out of his mind." And the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said, "He is possessed by Beelzebul. By the prince of demons, he's driving out demons." So Jesus called them over to him and began to speak to them in parables. How can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan opposes himself and is divided, he cannot stand. His end has come. In fact, no one can enter a strong man's house without first tying him up. Then he can plunder the strong man's house. Truly, I tell you, people can be forgiven all their sins and every slander they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. They are guilty of an eternal sin. He said this because they were saying he has an impure spirit. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and my brothers?" he asked. Then he looked at those seated in a circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." 2,000 years ago, Jesus was publicly accused of acting with the power of Satan. In the political sphere, nowadays we live in a society where the strategy of mud is the usual practice, which consists of throwing to the other's face the mud of defects, imperfections, bad actions, corruptions, indignities, and so on. It seems that the important thing is not to put on the table proposals to build, but the reasons to destroy. To feel ethically legitimized to criticize with the slogan, "Well, if I am bad, you are even more." The sin of criticism has existed from the very beginning of human history. Destructive criticism doesn't focus on analyzing the situation, but uses it as a pretext to undermine the person, his identity, his qualities, to evaluate and qualify them. Its aim is to establish a value judgment and sometimes to inflict harm and offense. Unlike constructive criticism, which seeks to listen and to understand, as Nicodemus did with Jesus, for example, destructive criticism, that of the scribes, doesn't aim to understand or show an alternative for improvement. We could say that destructive criticism closes on itself. It doesn't open options for learning. Usually, destructive criticism is motivated by feelings of envy and jealousy. When another person has achieved something to which we also aspire, instead of praising the achievement, we throw mud at them. We feel morally superior to others by bringing up their mistakes and shortcomings, whether real or invented. It's very easy to fall into criticism, and he who is without sin, let him throw the first stone. We have all discovered ourselves in long conversations in which we criticize someone, and after 45 minutes, 1 hour in which we have been criticizing, to clean our conscience, we say, "Well, in the end, who am I to judge others?" But of course, the evil is already sown. Jesus wasn't exempt from criticism from the Jewish authorities, in this case, the scribes. The scribes in ancient Israel were wise men whose job was to study the law, transcribe it, and write commentaries on it. Their task was to study and interpret the civil and religious laws and apply them to the details of daily life. Their rulings, similar to those of today's magistrates of a Supreme Court, were of great importance and became the basis for future interpretations. That set of decisions constituted the tradition against which Jesus so often spoke out, and which also often he was accused of having violated. In Jesus' times, the scribes were more influential than any other group of leaders. Many of them were members of the Sanhedrin. The irruption of Jesus in the public scene began to take away their protagonism because Jesus gave another interpretation of the law, and he did so with great authority. So, since they couldn't overthrow the message, the scribes wanted to overthrow the messenger. If social networks had existed, they would have been in charge of undermining the personal reputation of Jesus through internet and all other means. Slander is a crime against a person's honor. It's to express opinions that injure the dignity of a person, undermining his fame and undermining his own esteem. However, the scribes knew that if they spread the mud, Jesus uses the power of devil to cast out the demons, something would remain, because there's always someone who thinks that where there's smoke, there's fire. So the scribes were determined to discredit Jesus before the people. If they succeeded in accusing him of acting by demonic power, they could even bring legal charges against him. So this first reflection invites us to banish from our hearts that inclination we all feel towards destructive criticism. A second thought I'd like to share with you is about Jesus' words, "Whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven, he will bear his sin forever." What does sin against the Holy Spirit consist in? And isn't God's mercy infinite? To sin against the Holy Spirit is to despise God's love. Whoever doesn't feel in need of God, whoever doesn't feel that he's a sinner or doesn't want to be forgiven, cannot receive forgiveness, not because God doesn't want to, but because he cannot. Our freedom, which is a gift from God, is absolute, and God respects it to its ultimate consequences. In the face of someone who doesn't want to be forgiven or who feels that he has no need for forgiveness, what can God do? Nothing. God cannot act in that situation. Just as sunlight cannot enter into a room through the window whose blackout blinds are down, neither God's love and mercy can enter into a heart that remains closed. The door opens from the inside. And God bless you.